In this video, I'm going to talk about the risk management section of the Part 3 or Standards Check marking sheet. Now, there are 5 competencies within the risk management section, and each of those competencies you can score a maximum of 3 points, which means that the total number of points available to you in this part of the marking sheet is 15. Now, really important to note that this is the only section of the marking sheet where you must score a minimum number of points. If you score 7 points or fewer on this part, then that will result in an automatic fail. So today what I wanted to do was to give you 4 top tips to ensure that you're adequately covering everything that you need to be on your Part 3 test or your standards check to ensure that risk management is not an issue for you. The first tip I want to give you is about managing responsibilities within the car. Put another way, who is going to be doing what at any particular moment in time. Now, it's important at the start of your Part 3 or standards check and every driving lesson that we discuss risk. What are the risk increasing factors for today's driving lesson? Now, this can include things like how is your learner feeling today? What are the weather conditions like? But equally or arguably more important is what is your learner driver going to be required to do today and what are they going to take responsibility for on their own? And you could set the agreement up in some way that says that the learner is going to take responsibility for moving off from the side of the road outside their house, dealing with the normal giveaways in their local area, dealing with any pedestrian crossings if they're comfortable with that and they've done all that before. But maybe the instructor is going to be responsible for talking the pupil through the first few roundabouts, depending on the lesson plan that you've made. And there is another video available on lesson planning. If you haven't watched that already, please go and do that now. The agreement that's made at the start of the lesson will change as the lesson progresses, and this is a really vital point. Our job as driving instructors and trainers is to ensure that learning takes place, and that can sometimes mean that the pupil takes on more responsibility as the lesson progresses, i.e. that transfer of responsibility, which we all know about. But it's not a given that that responsibility always goes from the instructor to the learner. Sometimes if the learner is not having a particularly good day, for example, or if the route has been particularly busy today, maybe busier than the driving instructor expected, it's entirely within the realms of possibility that responsibility could come back for a temporary period of time from the learner driver to the instructor. And then also on responsibility, really vital that you're constantly reassessing it throughout the course of the driving lesson. This is what driving examiners are looking for on the Part 3 for the risk management section. The instructor needs to manage the risk or manage the responsibilities on an ongoing basis, not just at the start of the lesson. The first competency in this section around managing risk, it's not something that you do at the start of the lesson and then tick it off and that's you done. It's something that should be constantly reassessed by the instructor throughout the course of the lesson, and something that the pupil is actively involved in through conversation and Q&A at all times. The second tip to ensure that you're adequately covering risk management in your Part 3 check or your standards check or your everyday driving lessons, just to watch your pupil. It sounds really basic and we all think that we do watch our pupils. So I'm going to amend that advice and I'm going to say the top tip is to watch your pupil more than you are at the moment. It's so easy because we've been driving for so long, we're all really experienced drivers. It's so easy just to get fixated on what is happening in the road ahead. Driving instructors tend not to be great passengers, and because we are experienced drivers, our focus is always out that windscreen and what's going on ahead, far distance, middle distance. But we're here to develop the person who's driving. We can only develop and we can only have a real understanding of what our learner drivers are thinking and where they are looking and how they are feeling if we're paying really close attention to them. So that involves looking at our pupils more than we are already. And one tool that we use at BPM is actually the Mirror, Look, Talk acronym. And I'll put something up on the screen about this just now. So this is good practice for you if you're developing as a PDI, if you're out teaching learners already, or even if you're a fully qualified instructor. Try to get into the habit of, before you give any directions or instructions to your learner drivers, always check your mirrors first. Have a good look around, gather that information to see what's happening round about, because it may be that you spot somebody in your rearview mirror who's gunning it, breaking the speed limit, driving at high speed in the outside lane, and that may cause you to just pause the directional instruction that you were going to give for a moment. So make sure that you are assessing the surroundings first, make sure that you're fully aware of what's going on before you give any direction or instruction that could cause your pupil to do something that ends up not being a good idea. Once you've done that, once you have the information, once you're happy that the situation is clear for what you want to do next, then we're going to look at your pupil before we speak. So we're going to turn around, we're just going to look at our pupil, and what we're doing here is we're assessing their ability to take on board the instructions that we're going to give. So it could be that you look at your pupil and they're in the middle of, checking their mirrors, or, thinking about overtaking a parked car, or doing something else. You might pick up some, non-verbal communication that they're looking a little bit stressed, which means that maybe now is not the best time to give the direction or the instruction that you were going to give, or ask the question that you were going to ask. So look at your pupil, make sure that they're going to be receptive to what you're going to say, and then give the direction or the instruction that you were thinking about. Mirror look talk is just a really good way of ensuring that our directions instructions are given at a good time, that they're not distracting our pupil, and it also forces us to pay more attention to our main focus in the car, which is our learner driver. Our third top tip on the risk management in the Part 3 test or standards check is about developing your commentary, but also developing your silence, knowing when not to talk. So in terms of commentary, if you've been following the BPM training course, you'll know that we spend a lot of time on the advanced driving pillar, developing commentary skills to a reasonable standard. Our advanced driving pillar has been developed by Tom Stenson. It's very much in line with ROSPA and advanced driving concepts. So your commentary driving when you're at that Part 2 stage is, at a very basic level, it's just an opportunity to get used to the sound of your own voice. It's encouraging you to speak earlier than you normally would in terms of identifying hazards. It's just a really good way to get into good practice for when you are talking on a regular basis to your clients. When it comes to directions and instructions, you want to be developing your vocabulary in a very consistent way. You want to be ensuring that if you're giving directions at roundabouts, that you're doing that in a systematic way all the time. For example, okay Tom, at the roundabout head we're going to turn right, that is the third exit. So what I've done there is I've given an alert to Tom that I'm going to say something, okay Tom, so Tom now knows to stop. Obviously I will have checked my mirrors and I'll have looked at Tom before I'm doing this, but when I do come to talk, I will be alerting him and saying, okay Tom, and then I give the direction. We're going to turn right at the next roundabout, and then I'm going to identify it for him. That is the third exit, and then that gives Tom the opportunity to look at the direction map or scan across the roundabout, and it also gives them something to count as we're going around that roundabout. So alert, direct, identify, well-known approach for giving your directions and instructions. Directions and instructions always given in good time. Don't leave it too late. We need to give our we need to leave time for the possibility that our learners are going to not hear us, or they're going to be thinking of something else, or they're going to make a mistake. We need to build in time for all these things, which means starting that process really early, which you should be covering in early stages of your Part 3 training. And then also knowing when to be silent is part of commentary and Q&A, and when to speak. So if you've been dealing with an issue or having a conversation with your learner driver about, passing a bin lorry on a high street, and maybe that's just happened and now we're coming up to a roundabout, let's know when to stop talking about the bin lorry and what we've just experienced back there, because now we have something else coming up. So if your pupil asks you a question about the bin lorry, we need to be able to say, okay Tom, that's fine, I just want you to deal with this roundabout first, and then we can maybe pick up the conversation about the bin lorry once we've cleared this hazard. And stopping yourself from asking questions. I know from experience that sometimes we're sitting in a driving lesson and we're thinking about the best way to frame a question for a learner driver, and then suddenly it clicks into our brain and we blurt it out without actually being fully aware that our pupil is now in the middle of negotiating, a zebra crossing with prams and dogs and all that kind of thing. So, be aware of what's happening before. I guess links back to that first top tip, doesn't it? If we're gathering the information first and then we're looking, then we're talking after that. So back to that mirror look talk, and quite often if we're doing that well, that's going to encourage us not to say something. And then the final top tip around risk management is about golden tickets. My colleague Andy McFarlane came out with this term about the golden ticket. A golden ticket is a mistake that your learner driver makes that you weren't expecting them to. And from a Part 3 perspective or a standards check perspective, the golden ticket is your chance to show off to the examiner. It's your chance to demonstrate to the examiner that you know how to deal with mistakes when they happen on your driving lessons. It's a really core part of being an instructor. It's a really core part of the assessment that you're undergoing. It's what the examiner is looking for. How does the driving instructor deal with mistakes and gaps in knowledge and gaps in understanding and gaps in skill on the part of the learner driver? And I think that's how we would encourage you to think about mistakes. Does the pupil know what they should have done in that instance? Let's say, for example, there's a right-hand corner cut that happens. Personally, I wouldn't be leading with the question, why did you do that? What happened there? Because I think it can be a bit accusatory. I would be checking with your pupil that they actually do remember the correct way that they should be taking these right-hand turns. And that can be a bit patronising, but it's how you frame it. I would be saying things like, okay, Tom, I know that you know this, but just remind me, how should we have turned right from that major road into that minor road? And what you're doing is you're checking the knowledge. And then we can move on to understanding. So Tom, that's fine, you've remembered that. Remind me why it's important that we do take right-hand turns in that particular way. And this is the understanding. And there is always more than one reason we want people to do things in a certain way. And you can work through those with your pupil. Your pupil will remember some of them. Obviously, there could be a car coming up to the giveaway. If we're cutting corners, we're maybe just speeding a little bit, so we make sure we're in the correct gear, we're getting stability on the car, all these kinds of reasons. And then I guess the skill level, how can we judge that we're turning into that corner and making sure it's right, and then possibly you're using a reference point or some other means to make sure that happens. So look out for these golden tickets. One of the most common reasons for people failing a Part 3 test is that mistakes are happening and driving instructors are not addressing them properly. So look out for the golden tickets. They really are the thing that will help you get through that Part 3 test. That's 4 top tips for effective risk management in your Part 3 test or your standards check. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.